Hello everybody and welcome. Please stand, or at the very least put your hand over your heart for the playing of the pledge or the Star Spangled Banner. Pledge or the Star Spangled Banner. Now please remain standing or your hand over your heart for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice
for all.
Thank you.
Things are better left unknown, and I'll never find you here, 'cause no one's ever Oh, what a widow, a peaceful spider. When the glass is clean, she's a sneaky hider. Hide the lies and the alibis. Oh, what a sinner. Is it in her? What's the truth in this riddle? Is love really just this simple? I can't seem to find my way in this world that never stays. What a widow, a peaceful spider. When the glass is clean, she's a sneaky hider. Hide the lies and the alibis. What a sinner. Is it in her? Is this real? Just illusion? I'm lost in wonderland of confusion. I'm lost in wonderland of confusion. Is this real or just illusion? Manifestation or a dark delusion? Is this real or just illusion? I'm lost in a wonderland of confusion.
Rabbit Hole is a community-driven radio. At times the community comments may reveal prejudices and other beliefs that we or our sponsors do not condone. Views or opinions expressed by the community, callers, or guests, are those of the individual speaking and do not represent the views or opinions of this site. Ripon Common Sense content is intended for mature audiences only. Enjoy.
Coming to you from a secret cave, hidden deep within the wilderness. This is the Darkwolf's Den Show. Now, here is your host, Jerry Hicks.
That's right, I am Jerry Hicks, also known as the Dark Wolf, and we are broadcasting live from a secret cave, hidden deep within the wilderness of Tennessee. That's right. We're ripping through the electromagnetic soup, tearing through the atmosphere, and tunneling away into your radio like a quantum particle. This is the DarkWolf's Den Radio Show for Thursday, November the 4th, 2021. So whether you're on the edge of reality, the edge of the galaxy, or the edge of your seat, we're glad you chose us to be right there with you. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to episode 2 of the Freedom Flame series, where freedom burns brightly here. In this episode, we're going to discuss To the Republic. Is America a democracy, or is America a republic? Go ahead and put a 1 in the chat room if you think it is a democracy. Go ahead and put a 2 in the chat room if you think America is a republic. Go ahead and put a 3 in the chat room if you think America is something altogether different. There's a big question looming tonight, and we're going to get through it together, but first, let's see who all we have over here in the YouTube chat rooms, both on the Ripon Rabbit Hole YouTube channel as well as the DarkWolf's Den Show YouTube channel. How we doing over here tonight, guys? Got quite a few people, it looks like. We have My Life DIY hanging out in the DarkWolf's Den Show chat. Says Sandy B is just leaving and on her way home to join us when she gets there. Excellent. Glad to have you, My Life DIY. And over in the Ripon Rabbit Hole chat, we have, one more time over in the DarkWolf's Den Show, we got Jupiter's Realm. Says, LOL, Dark Wolf. Well, glad to have you here, Jupiter's Realm. One was a democracy, 2 was a republic, 3 was something altogether different. My Life says, I think she means 2. I'm going to go ahead and give her a moment while she's working on that. Over in the DarkWolf's Den Show, or the Ripon Rabbit Hole chat, I'm sorry. Welcome, Alva Yarder. Says the Duke, that's right, the Duke, Ripon Rabbit himself, Mr. AJ, first in the chat room tonight. Says hand over heart and still standing. Thank you, AJ, for joining us for the Pledge of Allegiance and the Star Spangled Banner. We've added that in at the beginning of the show, so we're glad to have you guys playing along. My Life has jumped back in with a 2.5. A republic, sort of, maybe something else. Who else we got here? Raider Champion dropping in with the Wonderland link for you guys wondering about the theme song. That is the Wonderland song by Chick Mandela Effect and Michael Musco. You can hear my grandbabies in the back there. Michael Fontaine, glad to have you, says hello, everyone. Hello, Michael. Terry Taggart says, hey, all. Hey, Terry, glad to have you, man. Danny Mull says, hey, everybody. All right, Terry Taggart says 3, something altogether different, not a democracy or a republic. Raider Champion with a 3.4, something different, not a democracy or a republic. David Vinson, welcome, David, glad to have you with a 3, not a democracy or a republic. AJ the Ripon Rabbit says 2, a republic democracy, so 3. Ooh, that is well put, my friend. We are going to discuss a lot tonight, I guarantee you. Alva says, I'm not sure what it is nowadays. Isn't that the truth? Maybe this episode will help clear at least a little bit of that up. Terry Taggart says, congratulations, AJ. AJ won last time with the Constitutional Republic. And we appreciate every last one of you guys listening, whether you are over on the YouTubes or if you're listening worldwide on Ripon Common Sense Radio Network, the Ripon Rabbit Hole. We appreciate every last one of you being along for the ride. And before we can dive deep into this incredibly important topic tonight, we have 2 more fun little segments to do. The first of which we call Today in History. On this day in 1922, Howard Carter discovers the tomb of the great Tutankhamun in Egypt, and opens up what would be called the Curse of Tutankhamun, though that is still debatable. Anyway, that happened on this day in 1922, and that is today's segment of Today in History. And sometimes it seems like history is repeating itself. If you ever looked at the 1920s and what all happened in that time period, you might be amazed at how closely it relates to today's issues. And that brings us to our next segment, a segment which we call
Say what?
Our quote of the day today, ladies and gentlemen, comes from Walter Lippmann. He says, and I quote, "In a free society, the state does not administer the affairs of men. It administers justice among men who conduct their own affairs," end quote. Once again, that is Walter Lippmann, and that is today's segment of
Say what?
Amazingly wise words from a wise man. And speaking of words, you know, ladies and gentlemen, the universe has taught me a valuable lesson. I would say even reminded me of a valuable lesson this week. And that is the fact that word matters. Language matters, right? How you define something and how you say something really determines the conversation that you're having. And as we know, politics tries to muddy up the conversation more times than not, but I got called out, and rightfully so, last week 2 times when I named the episode A Stolen Democracy. I made the same mistake I've seen made 1,000 times and did not even think about it at the time. And thank you, Chris, and everyone else who did call me out last week on that episode, because you bring a valid point. Is America a democracy, or are we a republic, right? Where does that fine line be drawn? If you listen to politicians all the time, they say we are a democracy, right? But what is the true nature of America? What is the government that we have? What rights are we given under this government? In order to determine all of this, we have to agree upon some terminology, and that is the most important part. What does the word democracy mean? What does the word Republican mean? Where does it all come from, right? To have a discussion, we must be speaking the same language. So that's what tonight's show is about. We're going to define the terms of the conversation as we continue to have it, because once again, getting your vocabulary correct could not be more important, because at least that point you know that you're saying the same things when you use these words, right?
There are a lot of claims.
And welcome, Sapphire Elf from Australia. Glad to have you here.
Claims that are made about the United States government. A particularly common claim is that America is a democracy.
And, you know, one point of the name of last week's episode, A Stolen Democracy, was kind of a play against those that keep saying they're a threat to our democracy. To say this or say that is a threat to our democracy. But I want you to think about that as we go forward in this conversation, because our democracy is very telling in what they're saying. Once again, words truly matter.
Is our democracy for sale in America? Of course!
Do you feel like our democracy is under threat right now?
I do feel our democracy under threat.
Of course!
We just need to go back to what Thomas Jefferson and Ben Franklin said, that equality and democracy should be the foundation of everything that we do.
That's actually taken way out of context.
Which was at the core of who we've been as a democracy for 240 years.
Of course!
I would love it if everybody in America agreed with me on every issue. I can't get my wife to agree with me on every issue, let alone the American people. It's called democracy. That's what it's about.
So the politicians all the time is talking about our democracy, their democracy, right? But what is the meaning of the term? Again, we need to get some definitions under control here.
So let's now have a look at the term democracy, which is derived from Greek and means rule by people.
At this point, I'm sure some of you are thinking, well, yeah, that sounds right. That sounds like America. We're ruled by the people, right? Well, not exactly.
The broadest definition of this term is a government by the people, the rule of the majority.
Now, let's rephrase that to the actual meaning, rule by mob.
As a system of government, it's as direct as it gets. The citizens vote on every matter. Every law and every right is subject to popular opinion.
And we do not get the say in every single law that is made and every single thing that is done in our government. And thank God our rights are not subject to public opinion.
The usual argument made against this system of government is that it isn't really a government in the
Welcome, Errol Taylor says, we are a republic. Perhaps?
In the first place. It's just a mob. The majority gets whatever the majority wants, even if it's at the expense of the minority. The majority could easily oppress the minority. This original concept is referred to as a direct democracy, and it's this version of democracy which is typically challenged when the counter-argument is made that America is in fact a republic.
So we have determined that we are not a direct democracy. Now let us define the term of republic. As I cannot reiterate enough, once again, the use of language and understanding the terms that we are using is incredibly important.
The term republic is derived from a Latin phrase meaning public affair and regards the government as a public matter. A broad definition of this term is a government in which supreme power resides in a body of citizens entitled to vote and is exercised by elected officers and representatives responsible to them and governing according to the law.
Representatives that are responsible to the people and governing according to the law, opposed to according to mob rule.
Those last 5 words are an integral part. The most basic distinction between these two forms of government is that a democracy is the rule of the majority, whereas a republic is the rule of law. But again, that's the most basic distinction between the most basic versions of these terms. There is a second definition of democracy here, which is noticeably similar to the definition of a republic.
And this is where the waters begin to get just a little bit murky.
A government in which the supreme power is vested in the people and exercised by them directly or indirectly through a system of representation, usually involving periodically held free elections. If somebody argues that America is a direct democracy, that would be incorrect. But if somebody argues that America is a democracy because American citizens are entitled to vote, that would be correct.
So the other day, as I was discussing this concept with somebody backstage, they brought up the point that because we do have free elections, that would qualify us as a democracy. And it's a valid point. I won't deny that, based on the second definition.
Still, it wouldn't be entirely correct because this definition only states that power is obtained via elections. It doesn't say anything about how the government is supposed to function, and let's not forget about semantics. There are a few different ideas as to what a legitimate democracy entails. Some would argue that a democracy is a country in which any number of citizens are entitled to vote. Just as long as there are votes being cast, it's a democracy.
And I gotta say, I don't really agree with that particular definition, that if as long as a vote is being cast, it's a democracy. I don't fully believe that's the way, number one, we work, but the way it should be defined as calling America a democracy just because, we have free elections.
But others would argue that it's not a democracy unless the franchise is universal. Those who would make that argument would also argue that the United States was not always a democracy, because there was a time when women couldn't vote, black people couldn't vote, non-landowners couldn't vote, etc.
And though that is a fair statement, that's still not necessarily true in America. There are still groups of people in America that are just not allowed to vote, even though they are free citizens of the country.
Although you could still question this argument by citing the disenfranchisement of teenagers or convicted felons if you thought that either of those groups are entitled to a vote as well. Then there is yet another version of this argument. Many would argue that it's not enough for citizens to vote. Those votes must directly determine the winner of an election. This is true of the legislative branch. Senators and representatives are directly elected. but it's not true of the executive branch.
As we know, more than once we have seen the, quote, popular candidate, end quote, not win the election, but the less voted for candidate due to the Electoral College.
The President of the United States is not elected by the popular vote, but rather by the Electoral College. And the way the Electoral College works, oversimplistically, is that the candidate who wins the most states wins the race, which leaves open the possibility that the candidate who gets the most votes will lose the election. So that's another way of countering this argument. If each citizen's vote for the head of state must count equally to be a democracy, then the United States of America does not qualify.
And I'm going to play that again just because that is so incredibly important.
If each citizen's vote for the head of state must count equally to be a democracy, then the United States of America does not qualify.
If each person's vote must count equally, then it would disqualify the United States from being a democracy.
By now, it's been demonstrated how there are
Although Terry Taggart brings a very valid point, the dead even get to vote in America.
Are multiple different understandings of what a democracy actually is. With 2 different standards for who can vote and 2 standards for what it decides, there are at least 4 different models. Some citizens vote for representatives directly, some citizens vote for representatives indirectly, all citizens vote for representatives directly, and all citizens vote for representatives indirectly. Because the definition is kind of open-ended, the term is used to describe different ideals. Sometimes the term democracy isn't even used to describe a function of government. Sometimes it is simply used to describe a free society, a country where people have the freedom to express their point of view. It's more of a sentimental use of the term more than anything else.
Like this audio bite from everybody's favorite mitten-wearing candidate, Mr. Bernie Sanders.
You know what democracy is about, and I really do love democracy, is one person, one vote. It is you disagree with me, that's fine. You got a better idea than me, fight for it. That's a beautiful thing.
Though I cannot disagree with him on the idea that having 2 points of view and being able to discuss and argue those points of view is a beautiful thing. I will give it that. But it also really bothers me, as I mentioned a moment ago, when you hear all of these representatives and law professors and constitutional professors use the word democracy. And they always say a threat to our democracy. It's our democracy. I think there's something very telling, like I mentioned in the beginning, about that. It's not our democracy as the American people. It's our democracy as those representatives have created their own democracy, if you will, against the American people. They've tried their best for a long, long time to convince the American people that we live in something we don't. Once again, a democracy, which is why I was called out twice last week on the show for using the term. And once again, I don't blame them. They were absolutely right to call me out for it.
As far as what the most accurate way to describe the U.S. government is, well, that's a pretty good question. We know that it's not a direct or pure democracy. Describing the United States merely as a democracy is relatively accurate because it describes American elections, but it doesn't describe a president or a constitution.
So to call America a democracy, definitely not a direct democracy, we've established that. But to call America a democracy would only mean that we have elections, free elections. But heck, Russia has free elections. China has free elections, according to what they believe anyway. Not that you're allowed to vote for anybody else. Or North Korea, the Democratic Republic of North Korea, right? I mean, just because you have a vote doesn't necessarily mean you have a democracy.
Describing it as a republic would also be relatively accurate because this term leaves a few stones unturned as well. Just like democracy, the term republic has multiple definitions, and one of them simply reads, a government having a chief of state who is not a monarch. You'll notice that neither one of these definitions explicitly state that there is a constitution, so it couldn't hurt to qualify this term by adding constitutional to it.
Something that the ones in power have seemed to forgot about, the ones currently in power, I should say, and that is the Constitution, of course. We are a constitutionally based nation.
And you could do the same for democracy. To distinguish it from a direct democracy, you could say representative democracy. These terms do a much better job of describing the United States of America, and what's better than using just one or the other, why not use both?
Though I will agree with the aspect of having a representative democracy to the point that we have people that do represent us, but it still doesn't fully define what America really is. And for those that are wondering about all the background noise tonight in the last couple of shows, well, we've got a couple more people in the den than we used to, and a lot more active than the den used to be. And just so you guys are aware, there's a lot going on behind me, but try not to let it distract you too much.
It's a mouthful, but it's closer to being correct. If not, you can just sandwich the single terms together to make Democratic Republic.
A democratic republic. That sounds a little closer to what America may actually be. You've got the Democratic side as far as the free elections and things like that. Then you've got the Republican side as far as having the Constitution and having the rule of law. At least that's the way it's supposed to work. However, as we discussed in last week's show, just because you have a free election doesn't mean who you're voting for isn't already corrupted, because who picks the ones we vote for, right? Who picks the candidates? Like old Tweed said, I don't care who the people vote for as long as I can choose who they're voting for on either side. In other words, as long as they're my crony, it doesn't matter who you vote for. The bad guy gets in every single time. And this is due to the MFers, or the money funders, if you will, as Rex Bear used to put it quite a bit, credit where it's due. And speaking of having credit where it's due, I'd like to fill you guys in on an update real quick of the situation that I mentioned a couple weeks ago. I always tell you guys, get involved. Now is the time to get involved. Now is the time to start writing your senators, start writing your governors, start writing your mayors, and let them know how you feel. Because they don't realize a lot of times what our complaints are. If they only hear from a few people, albeit one side, then they're only going to follow those people, right? They're only going to do as those people have requested. Well, I had an issue with our local transit system, and I've told you guys about that, where they refused to accept a medical exemption, when as far as to question that, which is absolutely illegal. So I did reach out to my senator, and I did reach out to my mayor, and my senator got back to me quite quickly. Credit where it's due, Senator Blackburn of Tennessee. I really appreciate her taking the time to read my concern and get back to me. The mayor, on the other hand, took a little longer. The mayor of my town, I understand they're busy, and I don't expect somebody to get back to me the next day. But after a week, I expect that I might have at least heard something, even a generic email to acknowledge you got my request of issue, right? Well, after a week, I sent another letter to the mayor, pretty much the same letter, and I added in how disappointed I was that it took me 2 times of sending this to hopefully get a reply. Within an hour, I had a reply from my mayor, who said they would look into the matter. Now, yes, I know they can say one thing and do another, as most politicians do, and I expect nothing less. However, if you don't get involved, then the answer is always going to be that nothing gets done. If the left side is getting involved, if only one side is giving their opinion to the representatives and to the senators and to the mayor, then that's the only opinion they hear. Then that's the opinion they think that the people want, right? This is why we have to get involved. This is why we have to raise our voice. Whether it's in my community or the little community of Ripon, Wisconsin, or the big communities in New York, in Texas, in Idaho, no matter the size of your community, no matter the size of your town, you have as much a voice as I do, and the mayor does, and anyone else does. But you have to exercise that voice. You have to exercise your rights. Take the time to reach out to your senator, to reach out to your representatives. In today's day and age, it's a lot easier. I was thinking about this earlier today, too. Growing up, we had pen and paper, right? We had only the ability to write a letter or call the mayor or call our representative and pray to goodness that they got back to us, as once again, they are very busy people. But in this day and age, you can write an email. It took me 10 minutes to write the first email that I sent, just explaining my concerns, explaining my situation, and explaining where I would go from there if the concerns did not get addressed. And lo and behold, at least I got a response. Now, do I think it's the response that's going to change everything? Not at all. I don't think one person can make that much difference, but one group of people can, right? My one letter may not make a lick of difference, or maybe it will. Maybe it will wake them up to realize what they're doing is wrong. I don't know. I will keep you guys informed on that, but if we don't try, if we don't try to write our representatives, if we don't try to write our mayors, if we don't try to voice our concerns, then what's the point of our concerns? How are they going to know? These guys are no more mind readers than we are, right? And they don't know what you think if you don't tell them. So reach out to these people, let them know. And Ripon, reach out to your representatives and let them know that you are not happy about these mandates, about this Smuckers doing what they're doing, about these companies forcing people to do things that are against their will at the very least, and unconstitutional at best. So I'm going to go ahead and stop ranting now. We are coming up on a network break, as you know that music means, so we do have to take a break right here, ladies and gentlemen. My name's Jerry Hicks, also known as the Dark Wolf, and you're listening to the DarkWolf's Den Radio Show exclusively on Ripon Common Sense Radio Network, the Ripon Rabbit Hole. Sit back, relax, and we'll be right back with the second half after these messages. Don't you touch that dial. That's right.
We gotta stoke the fires and run off the men in black. Don't touch that dial. We'll be right back.
Oh, yeah. A Thursday night on the Ripon Rabbit Hole. Hi, everyone. It's AJ, the Ripon Rabbit. Are you enjoying tonight's Darkwolf's Den Radio Show, the Freedom Flame series, To the Republic? I know I am. If you are, and you haven't done so already, please make sure to thumb up that video. Hit that subscribe button and ring that bell. You'll get our notifications every time we go live. We're here every Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday nights, bringing you the very best of common sense radio, the Ripon Rabbit Hole. I'll return again tomorrow night, Friday, November 5th, a special look down the rabbit hole of cover-ups. When somebody makes a mistake, what are the tactics used to cover them up when they do not want those mistakes to be known? It's going to be an interesting evening of cover-ups. Tomorrow night starts at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10/9 Central, as all shows do. Come along with me. Then Saturday night, November 6th. Can you believe it? It's November already. I just am blown away by that. We'll take on part 2 of the same discussion in Saturday night's blackmail episode, right? Usually when mistakes are meant to be covered up, usually a little bit of blackmail helps to cover up the mistakes. So we'll talk about those tactics Saturday, November 6th, again, 7 p.m. Pacific, 10/9 Central. 2 back-to-back very interesting episodes you will not want to miss. You will not want to miss Beat Eugene the 6th. Sunday night, our interactive family game show returns, as it does the first Sunday of every month. Come along with us as we play the most interactive family game show on radio, Beat Eugene. An evening full of interactive puzzles, games, riddles, trivia, and chance as you rack up the points in the ultimate attempt to beat Eugene. Will you beat Eugene, or perhaps will he beat you? One thing that's for certain is we will have the answer to that question before the end of this weekend. That's, again, Sunday night, November 7th. Invite your friends, invite your family, heck, invite your family's friends to come along with us and play Beat Eugene, the November edition. I can't wait. It's going to be a fun game. Any given Sunday, we know. Eugene, do you think you're going to hold a position on the top podium spot this month?
My answer is I think it is possible, but not certain.
Anything is possible, but not certain when it comes to Beat Eugene Sunday night. And that will end out the weekend together right with you. We'll return back to tonight's topic of To the Republic with your host, Jerry Hicks, and the DarkWolf's Den Radio Show for Thursday, November 4th. You're listening to the Rip'n Common Sense Radio Network, the Rip'n Rabbit Hole.
If you were meant to be controlled, you would have come with a remote, but you didn't. And that's why you listen to the DarkWolf's Den Show. Now, here is your host, Jerry Hicks.
That's right, I am Jerry Hicks, also known as the Dark Wolf. And welcome back to the second half of the DarkWolf's Den Show for Thursday, November the 4th, 2021. So whether you're on the edge of reality, the edge of the galaxy, or the edge of your seat, we're glad you chose us to be right there with you. Ladies and gentlemen, tonight we are discussing To the Republic. To the Republic for which we stand. Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir. Yes, folks. That is exactly what we are talking about. And we do the Pledge of Allegiance at the beginning of every show. And it amazes me how as we do that Pledge of Allegiance and we say to the Republic for which it stands, nobody thinks about the words. We take it for granted, right? And I will tell you folks, last night while we were doing the Pledge of Allegiance, I had my grandson here with me listening. And I'm here to tell you folks, somebody's taught him right. He had his hand over his heart and he was reciting the Pledge of Allegiance with me. And I could not have been more proud. So yeah, there are places in the country where we're still teaching the right way, right? But besides that, ladies and gentlemen, again, we are talking about To the Republic, and one of the main goals of tonight's show is to define terms, right? As I mentioned in the first half, the universe taught me a lesson this week, and could not help but reinforce it every chance that it got. And that is the fact that we need to define our terms to have a relevant conversation. Words truly matter. Like last week when I was talking about a stolen democracy and using the wrong word, because America is clearly not a democracy. And I feel bad for those that are in one. Thank God we're not, right? But we're going to continue on our examination of the forms of government of the United States, and we'll even be defining one more term before the end of the episode.
When Benjamin Franklin exited the Constitutional Convention, he was asked by a woman, "Sir, what have you given us?" His immediate response was, "A republic, ma'am, if you can keep it."
Our founding fathers were very, very wise, and they knew exactly what they created, and it was not a democracy.
Yet most Americans today have been persuaded that our nation's governmental system is a democracy and not a republic. The difference between these two is essential in understanding Americanism and the American system. Before we discuss political systems, however, it's helpful to address the confusion that has been spread about the political spectrum.
And once again, it comes down to the definition of terms. Where does the political spectrum span? It might not be what you actually think it is.
Many have been led to believe that the political spectrum places groups such as communists on the far left, fascists or dictators on the far right, and political moderates or centrists in the middle.
Which is exactly how we are taught to think about things, right? As far as the political spectrum going. That's even how I was taught that it went. However, I was incredibly wrong.
However, a more accurate political spectrum will show government having zero power on the far right to having 100% power on the far left. At the extreme right, there is no government.
As much as a lot of us disagree with our government right now, I think we could all agree that no government would not necessarily be the wisest way to do things. And we'll discuss that in more detail here in just a couple
The
moments.
extreme left features total government under such labels as communism, socialism, Nazism, fascism, princes, potentates, dictators, kings, any form of total government.
What it seems like they are disturbingly trying to push for with this left-handed government we had, it looks like they're trying to push for a full left-sided despot, right? A tyrant, a governor that thinks they can tell the American people how, when, and where to live their lives. As we know, that's not going to end well for that side.
Those who claim that Nazis and fascists are right-wing never define their terms. This amounts to spreading confusion.
And once again, I cannot reiterate enough. Define your terms. Words matter.
Toward the middle of the political spectrum can be found the type of government limited to its proper role of protecting the rights of the people. That's where the Constitution of the United States is. Those who advocate such a form of government are really constitutional moderates.
I don't know about you guys, but I think I just found the term that describes me, a constitutional moderate.
So let's analyze the basic forms of government. They are monarchy or dictatorship ruled by one, oligarchy ruled by a few.
And I am very aware that most of you have, or a lot of you have probably not heard the word oligarchy. I know that because I actually was talking to two people last night who had also never heard the term. So we will define that term here in just a moment.
Democracy ruled by a majority, republic ruled by law, and anarchy, which is ruled by no one. In discussing these five, we'll see that they can be narrowed down to even fewer.
First, let's take a look at something like England has.
Looking first at monarchy or dictatorship, this form of government doesn't really exist in the practical sense. It's always a group that puts one of its members up front. A king has his council of nobles or earls, and every dictator has his bureaucrats or commissars, the men behind the scenes.
Which is one reason in America that we don't have a monarchy, is that bureaucrats don't have the power. They're not elected officials, even though it seems like our current administration is trying to change that.
This isn't ruled by one, even though one person may be the visible leader. It's ruled by a group. So let's eliminate monarchy, dictatorship, because it never truly exists.
Now that we have ruled out monarchy, let us move to the next one in line, the oligarchy.
Oligarchy, which is ruled by a group, is the most common form of government in all history. And it is the most common form of government today. Most of the nations of the world are ruled by a powerful few, and therefore oligarchy remains.
So oligarchy, so we can make sure we define our term, is ruled by a group with one person as the head, as if they were the leader. Kind of like a rule by corporations, with one guy acting like the leader, kind of like what we're looking at today.
At the other end, we find anarchy, which means without government. Some people have looked over history and found that many of its worst crimes were committed by governments. So they decided that having no government might be a good idea. But this is a mistake, because as the ancient Greeks stated, without law there can be no freedom. Our founding fathers agreed and held that some amount of government is a necessary force in any civilized, orderly society.
And once again, I think we could all agree that anarchy is a really bad idea. There is some, at least small form of government needed. Now, we don't need big government by any means, but at least some small form.
In a state of anarchy, however, everyone has to guard life, liberty, and property, and the lives of family members. Everyone must be armed, and movement is severely restricted because one's property has to be protected at all times.
So anarchy is basically every man for himself, which is not a good way to live.
Civilized people have always hired someone to do the guarding, a sheriff, a police force, or some branch of government. Once law enforcement was in place, the people were freer. They could leave their property, work in the fields, and so on. In short, the proper amount of government makes everyone freer.
Which is one reason why the whole defund the police idea is one of the stupidest and worst ideas I believe I have ever heard.
There are some who advocate anarchy, however, not because they want no government, but because they don't like what they have. They use anarchy as a tool for revolutionary change. The condition of anarchy is very much like a vacuum where something rushes in to fill it. These calculating anarchists work to break down the existing government with rioting, killing, looting, and terrorism. Tragically, the people living in such chaos often go to those best able to put an end to it and beg them to take over and restore order. And who is best able to put an end to the chaos? The very people who started it.
Now, with that definition, I would like you guys to think back to the summer of 2020 and everything we witnessed right before the election. It's almost as if the Democrats were taking a page right out of this playbook. If I didn't know any better, I would say that's exactly what they did.
The anarchists who created the problem then create a government run by them, an oligarchy, where they have total power. This is exactly what happened in Russia that led to Lenin taking total power, and in Germany where Hitler's brown shirts created the chaos that brought him to power.
And in America, where the BLM, being the militant arm of the Democrat Party, attempted the same thing. And for those wondering, yes, I did just compare Joe Biden to Hitler.
But anarchy isn't a stable form of government. It's a quick transition from something that exists to something desired by the power-hungry. It's a temporary condition, and because it isn't permanent, we eliminate it as well.
So just for a quick recap, we have eliminated anarchy and monarchy and are left with three choices: oligarchy, democracy, or republic.
The word democracy comes from two Greek words, demos, meaning people, and kratein, meaning to rule. Democracy, therefore, means the rule of the people, majority rule. This, of course, sounds good. But suppose the majority decides to take away one's home, or business, or children. Obviously, there has to be a limit. The flaw in democracy is that the majority isn't restrained. If more than half the people can be persuaded to want something in a democracy, they rule.
Which seems to me to be the reason that, number one, our leaders, in quote, and I use that word lightly, continuously use the word democracy and say we are a threat to their democracy, because if they feel that if they can convince the American people one way or the other on something, no matter how right or good it is, that they can get it through.
What about republic? Well, that comes from the Latin, res meaning thing, and publica meaning public. It means the public thing, the law. A true republic is one where the government is limited by law, leaving the people alone.
This is what America is supposed to be. Once again, to quote Benjamin Franklin, a republic if you can keep it.
America's founders had a clean slate to write on. They could have set up an oligarchy. In fact, there were some who wanted George Washington to be their king. But the Founding Fathers knew history, and they chose to give us the rule of law in a republic, not the rule of a majority in a democracy.
Once again, I'm going to rewind and play that one more time because it is incredibly important.
And they chose to give us the rule of law in a republic, not the rule of a majority in a democracy.
Our founding fathers knew what they wanted to create, knew they wanted to create a form of freedom that they had not had in England, a form of freedom that would not be found anywhere else in the world.
Why? Let's demonstrate the difference in the setting of the Old West. Consider a lynch mob in a democracy. 35 horseback riders chase one lone gunman. They catch him, and they vote 35-1 to hang him. Democracy has triumphed, and there's one less gunman to contend with. Now consider the same scenario in a republic. The 35 horseback riders catch the gunman and vote 35-1 to hang him, but the sheriff arrives, and he says, "You can't kill him. He's got his right to a fair trial." So they take the gunman back to town. A jury of his peers is selected, and they hear the evidence and the defense, and they decide if he shall hang. Does the jury even decide by majority rule? No, it has to be unanimous or he goes free. The rights of the gunman aren't subject to majority rule, but to the law. This is the essence of a republic.
The rights of any person is not subject to mob rule or democratic rule. It is subject to the Constitution of the Republic, the laws in which it is given. that uphold our inalienable, God-given rights.
Many Americans would be surprised to learn that the word democracy does not appear in the Declaration of Independence or the U.S. Constitution, nor does it appear in any of the constitutions of the 50 states. The founders did everything they could to keep us from having a democracy.
Which is why it really burns me up when I hear people like Nancy Pelosi and others describing the democracy we live in and telling people we are a danger to their democracy, because we very much are. As a republic, we are an extreme danger to their mob rule.
James Madison, rightly known as the father of the Constitution, wrote in essay number 10 of the Federalist Papers, "Democracies have ever been spectacles of turbulence and contention, have ever been found incompatible with personal security or the rights of property, and have in general been as short in their lives as they have been violent in their deaths." Alexander Hamilton agreed, and he stated, "We are a republican government. Real liberty is never found in despotism or in the extremes of democracy."
And to be very, very clear, this is not a left or right thing. This isn't a Republican or Democrat thing. When they use the word Republican, they don't mean the Republican Party. There's nothing to do with parties. No matter what party you're in, you should see the issue right now with it being a democracy, or not being a democracy, but actually being a republic, right? But when they say Republican, they don't mean the Republican Party. Let's be clear. They mean a form of governance, a Republican or of the Republic form of governance.
Samuel Adams, a signer of the Declaration of Independence, stated, "Democracy never lasts long. It soon wastes, exhausts, and murders itself." The founders had good reason to look upon democracy with contempt, because they knew that the democracies in the early Greek city-states produced some of the wildest excesses of government imaginable. In every case, they ended up with mob rule, then anarchy, and finally tyranny under an oligarchy.
So let us take a look at the first example of a republic to ever be in the world, and that is, of course, Rome.
In the midst of plenty, however, the Roman people forgot what freedom entailed. They forgot that the essence of freedom is the proper limitation of government.
The essence of freedom is the proper limitation of government. I could not stress that enough, ladies and gentlemen.
When government power grows, people freedom recedes. Once the Romans dropped their guard, power-seeking politicians began to exceed the powers granted them in the Roman Constitution. Some learned that they could elect politicians who would use government power to take property from some and give it to others. Agriculture subsidies were introduced, followed by housing and welfare programs. Inevitably, taxes rose and controls over the private sector were imposed. Soon, a number of Rome's producers could no longer make ends meet, and they went on the dole.
If this is sounding oddly familiar to you guys, I would agree. It almost sounds like what we've witnessed in the last couple years of our own lifetime.
Productivity declined, shortages developed, and mobs began roaming the streets, demanding bread and circuses from the government. Many were induced to trade freedom for security.
And to once again quote Benjamin Franklin, those who would trade freedom for security deserve neither.
Eventually, the whole system came crashing down. They went from a republic to a democracy and ended up with an oligarchy under a progression of the Caesars. Thus, democracy itself is not a stable form of government. Instead, it is the gradual transition from limited government to the unlimited rule of an oligarchy. Knowing this, we as Americans are ultimately left with only two choices. We can keep our republic, as Franklin put it, or we will inevitably end up with an oligarchy, a tyranny of the elite.
And this, once again, as I started the episode saying, is why defining our terms is so important. America is not a democracy, perhaps a democratic republic at best, but a republic nonetheless. And if we do not hold on to our republic, it will turn to a democracy, and sadly, in the end, become an oligarchy. But what do you guys think? Do you think that we are a democracy? Do you think we're a republic? Do you think we are on a very slippery slope through a democratic ride into oligarchy? If this is what you think, then I cannot admonish you enough to please get involved. Let your representatives and congressmen and mayors know you have had enough and you're not going to take this anymore. Be polite, don't be rude, don't be threatening, but make yourself very, very clear. And in the end, ladies and gentlemen, all you can do is look at the evidence, apply a little common sense.
And you be the judge.
That's right, Bubby. We got to close it out. That's right, that's it for this episode of the DarkWolf's Den Show for Thursday, November the 4th, 2021. So whether you're on the edge of reality, the edge of the galaxy, or the edge of your seat, we're glad you chose us to be right there with you. Ladies and gentlemen, the Den may be closing for the last time this week, but don't you worry, we have kicked it off right, and the weekend fun has only just begun. That's right. Make sure you tune in to the Rippin' Rabbit Hole tomorrow, Friday, November the 5th, 2021, 7 p.m. Pacific, 10/9 Central. All shows here on the network start at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10/9 Central. On Friday night, our buddy AJ the Rippin' Rabbit returns to the airwaves for an all-new episode of the Rippin' Rabbit Hole live show, and he's going to be covering cover-ups, actually. There's a large amount of cover-ups going on, both in the little town of Ripon and nationwide. And these are things that we really need to look for. As a ufologist, I can tell you cover-ups are very much a real thing, especially when it comes to government. But this is the first part of a two-part series because our buddy AJ the Rippin' Rabbit will be back again on Saturday, November the 6th, 2021, 7 p.m. Pacific, 10/9 Central, to carry on the discussion of cover-ups into blackmail, one of the many ways used to create cover-ups. The scary thing about blackmail and blackmailers is the fact that it doesn't always necessarily have to be governmental, right? People can be blackmailed for all sort of reasons, and none of which are good. But maybe there's a workaround to blackmail, right? Perhaps there's a way to beat the blackmailer at their own game. And I'm sure AJ will discuss all this and more on Saturday, November the 6th, 2021, 7 p.m. Pacific, 10/9 Central. And then our buddy AJ comes back to round the weekend out right with one more episode of the Rippin' Rabbit Hole live show. We'll be doing the Beat Eugene episode 5, ladies and gentlemen. I did not make the podium last time. I'm not even sure that I was able to beat Eugene last time, but perhaps you can. Make sure you come back on Sunday, November the 7th, 2021, 7 p.m. Pacific, 10/9 Central, for a night of fun, trivia, games, riddles, and everything above. They will end out in one winner of the Beat Eugene. Can you beat Eugene? Can you be on the top of the podium? Or will Eugene beat you? I guess we will find out on Sunday, November the 7th, 2021, 7 p.m. Pacific, 10/9 Central, right here on Rippin' Common Sense Radio, the Rippin' Rabbit Hole. Speaking of the Rippin' Rabbit Hole, make sure you hop on over to the rippinrabbithole.com. That is RIPON, Over there, you're going to find a plethora of fun. That's right. But first things first, you got to sign up for your Backstage Pass. This gives you access to all of the rest of the amazing features of the rippinrabbithole.com, as well as making sure you get an email once a week, every week, with all the DarkWolf's Dens and Rippin' Rabbit Holes that you can imagine we would be doing every week. And you'll be able to send these out and send it to your friends, your family, your family's friends, or your friend's family, and let them know what we'll be talking about all weekend long. We do not sell, give away, or in any way extend your information to anyone. It stays locked in our archives. And speaking of archives, that's another fun thing you can do on the rippinrabbithole.com. You can go to the live on-air section and drop down to the on-demand section and check out any show you have missed since we've begun doing shows. Every Rippin' Rabbit Hole, every DarkWolf's Den show, every bit of it is there, ladies and gentlemen. Also, while you're there, make sure you check out the 24/7 Backstage Lounge. That's where I'm heading here in just a couple moments with the rest of the rabbits, as we will probably continue this discussion on democracy versus republic, right? And there's no telling what comes up. We have a lot of great conversations back there, and I would urge you to drop on by and say hi. We'd love to have you. Also, while you're on the ripinrabbithole.com, make sure you drop down the rabbit hole. That is our exclusive social media section, where you're more than free to drop your information, and we will not shadow ban or check it against false narratives like the fake boys like Facebook, Twitter, and all those very, very censored areas. We don't censor like that, so come on over and drop the information for the rabbits. We would love to see it. With that said, ladies and gentlemen, we have to get out of here this week. It's been an honor and a pleasure to come back week after week and do these for you guys, and you know we love it. So on behalf of AJ the Rippin' Rabbit, Chick Mandela Effect, Michael Musco, Walt House, everybody involved with Rippin' Common Sense Radio Network, our amazing mod team in both the Rippin' Rabbit Hole as well as the Darkwolf's Den Show YouTube channels, and Mr. Tom Bayless for this amazing music. Get down with it, Tom. If you're looking for a custom soundtrack for your next project, check out Red Shed Studios, links in the description. On behalf of all these folks, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Jerry Hicks, also known as the Dark Wolf, and you've been listening to the Darkwolf's Den Radio Show exclusively on Rippin' Common Sense Radio, the Rippin' Rabbit Hole. Until next time, ladies and gentlemen, remember, stay awake, but dare to dream. Good night, everybody. How? Yeah. That's right. Let's go, Brandon. That's right. You guys know. Say it with me. Let's go, Brandon. Come on. Come on. Come on.
You be the judge.
Let's go, Brandon.
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 FJB. Let's go, Brandon.
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 FJB. Let's go, Brandon.
Let's go, Brandon.
FJB. Let's go, Brandon.
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 What's the truth?
Again.
Let's go, Brandon.
Let's go, Brandon.
Let's go, Brandon.
Let's go. Let's go, Brandon.
Let's go, Brandon.
Let's go, Brandon.
Let's go, Brandon.
That's right, boys. Let's go, Brandon.
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 What's those letters right there say? What's those letters?
FJB.
FJB, that's right. Let's go, Brandon.
Let's go, Brandon. Wait a minute, that's what I said.
Let's go, Brandon. Uh-huh.
Let's go, Brandon. FJB.
That's right, Bubby boys.
FJB.
Let's go, Brandon.
FJB.
Let's go, Brandon.
FJB.
My amazing grandsons, ladies and gentlemen, you can't beat it. I love it. Let's go, Brandon. Let's go, Brandon. FJP. Let's go, Brandon.
FJ Papa.
Bubby. Let's go, Brandon.
Let's go, FJ.
No, let's go, Brandon.
No. Let's go, Papa.
Let's not go Papa. Let's go, Brandon.
Let's go, FJB.
I think I've created some monsters, ladies and gentlemen.
Let's go. Let's
Yeah, we're live.
Papa.
Let's go, Brandon.
Let's go, Papa.
Let's go, Brandon.
FJB. FJB. FPP. FJB. FPP.
All right, one last time together. 1, 2, 3. Let's go, Brandon.
FJB.
That's my grandson, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for being here.
Brandon.
Thank you so much for being here. We very much appreciate it. Until next week, ladies and gentlemen, remember,
Papa.
let's go, Brandon.
Let's go,
FJB. Night, everybody.
FJB.